Hi, welcome back to Conversations with Nadja and Ro. Today we're going to be talking about picking who's on your team. Remember when you were at school and you had sports lessons and they always said, right, we're going to have team captains and you get to choose your team. Spookily, I was never chosen on the team, but I bet you were, weren't you?
Well, I am a bit more athletic, maybe.
You're a hockey player, so you people will want you to be on their team. I'm sure I was useless at sports. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. What happens when you can't pick your team and what happens if you end up in the worst team? So, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't done so yet, please like and subscribe to our channel. It does make a huge difference to the algorithms and also helps us stay motivated to bring you some great content. So, let's get straight into it then, Nadia. Um, Thinking about, you're working in an organization and this has happened to me a lot of times in organizations where you're told, right, Ro, you're going to be working on this team because we need your skills in this area. And so you rock up to the kickoff and you find that you've got a sort of a mixed bag of people in the team. And there was usually one or two people on the team who you weren't quite sure about. And then you go, oh, okay, how's this going to go? What's going to happen? Did you ever have that happen to you, Nadia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you join any team, any opportunity in life, so to say, it's really all about the people. Like, I think I had that realization. Like, I used to work in a big company where, certain processes were set up and we were sometimes getting frustrated about, those processes. But then I started out by myself and then I really noticed, right, it's all about the people. And sort of starting out by yourself, having in mind, the type of people that you're looking for and how to collaborate. And yeah, hugely important.
Yeah. So what I noticed, and I guess this was probably the start of my team coaching journey, what I noticed was that rarely in those environments where you're all pushed together in a team, and let's face it, it wasn't a team to begin with, it was a working group. And sometimes it never became a team because you were never interdependent, you were never looking out for the big agenda. It was always about individual agendas. But just thinking back to those experiences, we rarely, if ever, did any reflection on how we were working together as a team. And I don't know if you had the same experience with teams or groups that you were working with as well. Did you ever
Yeah,
sort of sit
absolutely.
back and think about how you were working together?
No, not at all. Yeah, it's really because, yeah, when you raise this topic, it's fascinating. And I try to actually look online also around, whether there's some articles written, but it's kind of like it's not even in people's minds to actually pick your team. Yet in sports, as you said, like I'm a hockey player, play floorball, and I really thoroughly enjoy that, the passing and the really working together. You really literally can't do it alone in a team sport. You need each other. And that dependency, in actual honesty, I've never really experienced at work. Like there was people that you really gel with or you really collaborate together, but it's maybe one or two, but never really in a big team where you fully feel right, what we're doing together is actually getting more results than if I were to do it by myself. And it's just really, really interesting because I just looked online a little bit around, picking your team, and what came up was managers picking their team, and that happens all too often. And actually, like HR has a role in that as well, but it's kind of like out there. And so they're experimenting a little bit with getting people to work in the team before they're actually offered the job.
Yeah.
But that's as far as, picking your team go, but to actually leave it to the team, like you wrote books around, self-organizing teams and really the team picking the team, right, okay, we feel that with these people, we feel like we're up for the task. Yeah, I think it's a really great experiment to be had, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's kind of a reality check here, isn't there? Because in effect, in organizations, the manager is the team captain. So I guess it's only natural that they would pick the team. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that you can't do some of the great teaming things that you need to do to create that honesty and transparency about how you're going to work together. And obviously, we talked about transparency last time. So been thinking about this, and as obviously when we started working together, we went through this kind of similar activity. And it's based on research that Ruth Wagaman and J.R. Hackman did around what makes effective teams. And the Ruth Wagman took it and she's developed this process which she based on how operating teams in hospitals come together. You know, they have a sort of a protocol that they go through, which takes about 10 minutes and you know it's timed, so it's not designed to be long. Those 10 minutes, because of course you're with different teams for each different operation. And those first 10 minutes they spend sort of going around the room. So, you know, what are you bringing to this team that's going to help with this particular procedure? So you might have a scrub nurse or an anaesthetist or whatever it is. And they talk about the skills that they bring in. They talk about any questions, challenges they might have. And they go through this process of kind of working out who's doing what in the procedure before they actually start. And it's designed to actually get everything out on the table. But because it's a process that they go through often, it's kind of a habit that they have, a ritual that they go through. And that then means that they can get pretty much like you would in sport, actually, you know, what's your strength? Is it goal defense? Is it striker? What is it? And so they go through this process and I think it's a really neat process. And I just wonder how often, and you know, listeners, if you do this, then please chip in the comments below. How often do you do that in a team environment at work? Even if the team is picked by the captain, how often will the captain actually go round and sort of do that kind of activity before you actually get into the nuts and bolts? I just wondered what your experience was and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Like I've never really appreciated, in like different types of because like I've worked in business all my life, and it's definitely not something that I've come across. And so, what I'm enthusiastic about, I suppose, is how can we replicate that model into business? And I appreciate, like we just spoke about the rate of change, and technology going faster. And I think there's some really innovative companies out there that we may want to research and in terms of what they're doing, because I do think I read something that within the Googles and those sort of Silicon Valley companies, they have experimented with this, but in the Perth environment certainly I haven't seen it. So yeah, like you said, we'll be really interested if our listeners have some examples of that. But I think it would be highly beneficial to do that, because it, and we talked about this last time in terms of trust building and like, because I think you need that sort of, because what came from what you were telling me about how they do that in health, in hospitals and with medical staff. I guess once it's become a process, like that just sets it up almost like a ritual or a process or however you want to call it, label it with a business term. But by doing that all the time, you actually build a habit, right? And that's all, like that's a lot of the team coaching that we do. It is around that, right? How do we build different habits? And as soon as it's become a habit, and hopefully positive habits, because you can develop, unhealthy habits as well. But yeah, I quite like that about what you were saying, and it really sparked sort of that inspiration of how do you replicate that in business, and as you talked about how we came together, for me that was one of the things, because you're really big on that, and really sort of right, we said how are we going to be handling if something like this happens, or or we're faced with something that's challenging, how are we going to be keeping each other accountable? How are we going to be saying, like, oh, I thought, how are we going to be providing feedback to each other, for instance? I think that was a really good one. And we framed that up in terms of, right, we just have, we do a team coaching together, and then afterwards we evaluate. And I felt that, to have that process sort of mentioned up front, and then you actually follow through on that in itself is like a little mini just a practical experience of what it is to be working with each other and actually evaluate and what went well and what could we have done better. And I think that's how our relationship sort of grew as well as team coaches working together. Yeah. And really sort of benefiting from that, together each achieve more. So together we're actually building something new. It's not just a collection of us individuals, you doing your thing, me, my own thing, and then somewhere sort of as if, has happened to come together. No, it's actually thought about, we feed off each other. Even in these conversations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting as you were talking about that because I was thinking about something I did in my early consulting career when I went on my own. I did a piece with a client and I talked about psychosynthesis, which is basically where people coming together is much greater than the sum of the parts. And that's really what teamwork is about. It's what team coaching is about. It's what co-coaching is about. So that was just running through my mind as you were saying that, because it's also about honoring, what is it that's different about you that you're bringing into the work, and what is it that is different about me that I'm bringing into the work, and how can we bring those together in a way that is actually going to be more than the sum of the parts. So for me, that's what it's about. And this, I guess this was triggered because I'm doing a talk in March with a group, and I asked them to give me some thoughts beforehand. And the person who's organising it, awesome person, he basically gave the response that he's worked with an awesome team, and it was fantastic from the get-go. And I think that's amazing. If you've got that sort of connection up front, I think that's absolutely brilliant. And it wouldn't be wonderful if we didn't need to have coaching, we didn't need to have any form of sort of learning in the workplace. But that's probably the exception rather than the rule. And often you get teams that are worse together rather than better together. So that was kind of what was a trigger for this conversation. And just simple routines like, how are we going to start working together? What are the things that we're going to get out on the table in terms of what are the things that we offer? And then also, how are we going to support each other as well? If you've got skill set in, for example, narrative coaching and constellation work, how might I then support you? Not knowing stuff, how might I then support you so that you don't always feel that I'm solely responsible for that, because teamwork is about interdependence. So it's also about being able to take up the slack for other people. So I'm going to ask you that question then. So based on the fact that obviously I know a little bit about constellations, I'm not completely green, but I know very little about narrative coaching. How do you think I might be able to team with you in a way that's going to support you, even though I don't really know much about narrative coaching?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think narrative coaching is quite intuitive. But it is an intuition that we may have lost a little bit, because narrative coaching is all about telling stories. So it's almost about, how are we going to be together? Like you can say, you can dream up a list of things that we're going to do. But you can also paint a picture, how does it feel like when we're working, well together? What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? How do we know that we've achieved those outcomes? And that's a different sort of approach to, saying, look, we have this goal and this is what we're going to do, and this is the plan that we're going to be laying out to get there. It's more sort of asking those team coaching questions, I suppose, team, if you're really working well together, how does that feel like? Because sometimes in the workplace, like we talked about last time, people can feel maybe a little bit lonely. But if you're really achieving as a team, what that feel like? Maybe someone says, "Oh, we're just giving high fives all the time," or like that celebration, for instance. And what is the feeling that actually goes with that? It's instead of like dreaming up a list of tasks, and when we've done the tasks, yes, we can celebrate as well. And it's just a different set of sensations and things that come into play.
Yeah. So I guess it's about spotting for opportunities when we can actually really tap in to what's the shared experience of the team at the moment. What are people experiencing, that kind of thing, as we're going through these conversations. Yeah. Because often we have those stories going in our head, we just don't verbalize. And I guess there's always an element of what is going to be helpful to share and what isn't going to be helpful to share. And sometimes, you don't know that until you've actually shared it. And then I guess once you've shared it, sometimes the job of or the role of the coach is then to help the team process what has just been shared in a way which is productive, because we're not, I think sometimes coaching falsely is presented as a rah-rah activity. We're there to sort of cheer on the client and give high fives and do all this kind of stuff, which of course we are, because we want to encourage, we want to support the client as they move through the journey. And then there's also that aspect of, okay, acknowledging that life isn't always high fives. Sometimes there are those moments of discomfort, and helping the team actually sit in that place of discomfort, and in doing so create that as a learning experience rather than a destructive experience. So that was kind of what was coming up when you were saying that.
Yeah, totally. And to build on that, I think that's exactly where it is really useful to team coach with two coaches, so co-coaching, because there's always this sense of, like what is being said and what is sort of being read in between the lines. And I think being there to appreciate both streams, so to say. So the first one is really, what's being said, and that could be very much around tasks or things that need to get done, or a plan that needs to get worked through. And a coach is really beneficial in terms of, making sure that people stick to the plan, so that at the end of the plan, the goal is achieved, which was set out in the plan in the first place. However, in plans, sometimes things go wrong, or sometimes there's barriers, like there's hurdles to be overcome. And it's also the job of a team coach to sort of sense into those hurdles. So, as an example, people have quite often, I think, been in meetings where everybody's really enthusiastic and really keen to get it done or the task done. And then the meeting is sort of over and everybody goes back to work. And next week there's another team meeting, and then the progress has actually been very little. And so it's almost like there's this constant churn of, yes, we're really fully engaged and, we're enthusiastic and we have this really inspirational goal that we all want to achieve, but it's not really quite happening. So what's that? And that's kind of like the stream underneath, like the undercurrent. So what's actually preventing us from getting the task done? And that's also where coaching can be really, really beneficial.
Yeah, so it's kind of holding the mirror up to the team and saying, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. So we never know where these conversations are going to go, do we? And there's kind of always something that comes up for us as we're talking, which is probably it's probably about how coaching works in general, and obviously how team coaching works as well. So what would, how would you summarize what we've been talking about today?
Yeah, so the topic was really pick your team, and we've sort of established that in certain industries, or even in sports, it's kind of like not a question. There's always going to be that sense and that level of picking the right team for the job. And then we've established that in other sides of the business or other industries, it's not as common. So it's really interesting to look, right, would it be a great experiment to do that? And then also we talked about how coaching can actually help in that. And as you were talking, Ro, what was going through my mind as well is that quite often when we apply for a job, or we do a job interview, and we put our best selves forward, but it's all on an assumption of what that best self might look like. We never really truly know what the job is all about. And so I think even in that instance, to be able to pick and be really truthful about, what is it that I can contribute? Because you mentioned that and you made that point around, we don't want all copycats of ourselves. I mean, groupthink may be a wonderful thing to feel good, but when it really comes down to performance and to really reaching targets, what we find time and time again, it's evidence-based, is that groupthink is not going to get you the best outcomes. And so it's really like that conundrum to me is really interesting, because when we apply for jobs and we almost look like a person, or we want to sort of find a person that's almost similar to us, like we want to hear the answers that we want to hear, but it's actually, can we challenge us to look for people that are different?
Yeah.
And and in that difference, how vulnerable can we be in being honest about that difference? And that's where team coaches, I think, can help tremendously as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Because you don't always get to pick. Sometimes you are picked to be on the team. So it's, going with just a little bit of knowledge about how you can manage yourself so that you are able to help others, I think is the key, really. And if you're fortunate enough to be on a team that's awesome, well, excellent. Stick with that team.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this other conversation that we've had today. If you've got any thoughts about some of the things that you would like to hear us talk about as they're relating to teams or maybe team coaching, then please drop thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for listening. And remember, what do we say? We are human beings, not human doings. See you next time.
Thank you, Ro. Thank you, listeners.